This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Hamas and Islamic Jihad hold their summer camps, and they don't include swimming and hiking, but shooting and marching. Plus, the UAE brings its embassy to Israel in one more step in the Abrahamic Accords, and Israeli archaeologists recover a 3,000-year-old inscription with a name from the Bible. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Summer usually means swimming, boating, and friendship. In one part of the world, the Gaza Strip, this tradition is more like boot camp with a dangerous message. They call them the Pioneers of Liberation and the Sword of Jerusalem summer camps, run by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. These videos, posted by Memory, the Middle East Media Research Institute, show what the youth of Gaza are doing this summer.
We did not come here to enjoy ourselves or to play or anything like that. We came with our souls, our blood, our martyrs, and are wounded to sacrifice ourselves for Palestine and for our people.
This promotional video urges students from primary school, high school, and college to participate. In the camp, target practice involves AK-47s, anti-tank weapons, and video simulations.
So that in the next phase, Allah willing, these boys will be able to confront the plundering enemy and disfigure its face in the next war.
In May, Hamas and Islamic Jihad called the 11-day war with Israel the Sword of Jerusalem. Their goal, preparing the next generation for the next war.
We say to the enemy, these children picked up these weapons, and we train them how to use them, as well as how to take security measures, so that they will follow in the footsteps of their fathers and take up arms, Allah willing.
I chose to spend my vacation in the Pioneers of Liberation summer camp in order to continue the path of my father, the martyred commander Walid Shamala Abu Bilal, and in order to strengthen our determination and to liberate Jerusalem, Allah willing.
These young men and boys learn anti-Semitism at an early age.
We asked Hitler why he left some of you alive. He did so in order to show us how wicked you are. We will come to you from under the ground and hammer fear into your hearts, and above the ground we will tear your bodies apart with our rockets. Scram into the shelters, you mice, you sons of Jewish women.
Memory has been monitoring these summer camps for 10 years.
The videos and images from those camps illustrate and reflect the way Hamas is operating and deepening its control. In 10-15 years from now, the kids will be adults or parents and maybe even an officials in Gaza and decision makers. So the extremism in Gaza will be even worse.
Hamas took over the Gaza Strip 13 years ago in a bloody battle with the Palestinian Authority.
So since birth, this generation has been raised only on the values of these terrorist movements. This is, of course, only deepening the crisis there, thwarting any chance for dignified, peaceful life for the kids and for all the residents of Gaza.
She feels the international community needs to speak up about these camps. While these kids are in camp, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh is visiting nations like Mauritania, pledging to continue the war against Israel.
Let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, the sword of Jerusalem will not be sheathed until the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque is liberated.
Given these summer camps, it appears clear the goal is that the battle for Jerusalem will continue into the next generation. While Hamas and Islamic Jihad are preparing the next generation in Gaza for war with Israel, other Middle East countries like the United Arab Emirates are preparing their people for peace with the Jewish people. The UAE took a step into that future by bringing its embassy to Tel Aviv. Israeli President Isaac Herzog and UAE's ambassador to Israel talked about a new partnership and a new Middle East.
This embassy will serve not just as a home for diplomats, but a base for our task to continue to build on our new partnership, to seek dialogue, not dispute, to build a new paradigm of peace, and to provide a model for a new, collaborative approach to conflict resolution in the Middle East.
I'm so delighted to have the opportunity at the beginning of my term as President of the State of Israel to take part in this historic opening of the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Israel. The opening of this embassy is an important milestone in our shared journey towards a future of peace, prosperity, and security for the Middle East.
U.S. intelligence uncovered a plot by the Iranian regime to kidnap an American citizen for criticizing Iran's strict religious laws for women. Masih Alinejad, an Iranian-born writer and activist living in New York, worked with the FBI after learning of the alleged plot to abduct her from her home in Brooklyn. In an interview with the Associated Press, she vowed to keep speaking out.
I give voice to the mothers whose children got killed, got shot in the head, got shot in the chest, got tortured to death in prison. I give voice to those women inside Iran who say no to compulsory hijab, who say that we want to be our true self. If you arrest me, you're going to keep them silent? No.
15 years after the second Israel-Lebanon war, could the two sides be heading for the third war? 15 years ago this summer, Israel and Hezbollah fought the second Lebanon war. A decade and a half later, both Israel and Hezbollah are preparing for the next war. Here's a story we did recently about the danger for a possible third Lebanon war. The border here between Israel and Lebanon is deceptively quiet, but on the other side of this fence lies Hezbollah with more than 100,000 rockets that can hit almost anywhere inside Israel.
All of them were brought to Lebanon in order to be launched against Israel one day.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi studies the danger of Hezbollah through her research organization, Alma.
Hezbollah is the proxy of Iran in the region. It's the most professional proxy of Iran in the region. It's the most equipped, dangerous proxy of Iran in the region. And we are here standing, looking in the eyes of Hezbollah. And the people that are raising their kids just a few feet from us, every morning looking in the eyes of Hezbollah.
I'm standing in the village of Hanita here on the Israeli-Lebanese border. Behind me, you can see children playing in this kindergarten, and over here, you can see how close the Lebanese border is. The sense of danger is real and ever present for those living here. In 2006, they lived through a 34-day war, which saw Hezbollah fire nearly 4,000 rockets into Israel. That barrage paralyzed northern Israel, chasing 1 million Israelis to the south, while the rest spent most of that month in bomb shelters. In 2021, the IDF believes Hezbollah is once again considering attacking Israel in what Zahavi describes as days of battle.
Days of battle would mean that the people that are living just here, a few feet from us, would not be able to get out of their home because it will be too dangerous. Meaning that their children will hear the sirens every 2 weeks and will have to run for shelter. This is a reality that is unbearable for the people of the north.
This is the only active border crossing between Israel and Lebanon. The UN base is just down the road within a no man's land, and I'm standing in an IDF base that keeps constant watch over Hezbollah.
Their threat is no joke, and we never underestimate our enemy, but we keep training, we keep practicing, we keep on gathering intelligence and always getting prepared and keeping readiness for the next conflict, for the next fight, making sure we have the upper hand.
Lieutenant Dalton describes Hezbollah's military strategy as one of blending in by creating a virtual civilian camouflage.
Hezbollah decided to take the step and make all of its establishments in southern Lebanon based on civilian clothing, civilian territory, civilian houses, really blend itself, camouflage itself into the population and keep operating in. So they know to hide, whether it's taking over civilian villages or households and really setting base up over there. But our intelligence is strong enough to understand their work and how they operate and to really pinpoint the location of their bases inside civilian territory.
Another hidden weapon in Hezbollah's arsenal is these underground tunnels along the border. CBN News got a rare look into this one that took years to build. Measuring at least 25 stories deep, it had already crossed into Israeli territory before the IDF uncovered and sealed it. Zahavi's organization identified another weapon by exposing Hezbollah assembling precision-guided missiles inside Beirut.
What most Americans, most Christians in the United States, North America, and around the world don't realize is that Lebanon is important to Iran because it is the forward operating base of their most aggressive offensive attack whenever they decide to attack Israel.
Middle East expert and author of the Beirut Protocol, Joel Rosenberg warns what might happen as the Biden administration considers re-entering the Iranian nuclear deal.
If Israel feared that the Biden administration was going to go down some road of negotiations that was short-sighted, ill-conceived, and dangerous, Israel might have to attack to neutralize those sites.
That could trigger Hezbollah.
Iran would unleash a barrage, the most devastating missile attack maybe in the history of mankind. They have upwards of, I hear, 150,000 missiles positioned right across that border, all through southern Lebanon. And they would light up the skies, and all the Israel defenses, all the missile defenses we have, would do some good, but it couldn't possibly stop a barrage of thousands and thousands and thousands of missiles coming in every day.
Israel's leaders realize those dangers. Some believe the IDF's goal would be to make its next response so massive that the next war with Hezbollah would be known as the last. Up next, we talk with Pastor Ray Bentley about a new book series that discusses current events, prophecy, and the city of Jerusalem. Pastor Ray Bentley of Maranatha Chapel in San Diego, California, partnered with best-selling authors Brock and Bodie Tenney to write a trilogy that mixes current events, Jerusalem, and prophecy in modern-day thrillers. I talked with Pastor Bentley about the trilogy and why he believes prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes. So, Pastor Ray, you and Bodie Tenney have co-authored a trilogy, the Jack Garrison novels,
Yes.
The Mountain of the Lord, The Threshing Floor, and The Cyrus Mandate. I find it particularly interesting and exciting. I live here in Jerusalem, and I felt like you were taking me into the city itself. So it was a great work. Tell us about the trilogy.
By God's amazing grace, I got to meet Bodie and her husband Brock a few years ago. And, I had read their series in the Zion Chronicles and all of their, it's great history, great storytelling. Brock is the researcher and Bodie's the storyteller. Then I got to meet them. And shortly thereafter, I had an idea because they've mostly written, kind of historical fiction novels that have a lot of biblical truth, prophecy in them about the past, either the first century, the rebirth of Israel, 1948, 1967, but they've never written anything contemporary about what's happening literally right now. Well, that's what God's put a fire in my heart. Maranatha Chapel, a Jesus people guy. Jesus is coming soon, and Israel's kind of the sign, the clock on the wall. So I called them and I said, hey, Brock and Bodie, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but would you consider, joining together, and I'll kind of provide how I'm seeing prophetic things coming to pass, and you wrap that in a story. Brock, you do the research. And they prayed about it and they said, oh man, we are excited about this. And so we launched this series, and it's about this American character named Jack Garrison, who has had a tragedy in his life, like many believers maybe in America, and he's kind of lost his faith to a great degree, and he doesn't believe in prophecies and the Bible relating to end times. But he is in a unique position to be sent on a peacekeeping commission to go to Israel and the Middle East and Europe and try to forge a peace deal. And basically he goes on this tremendous journey of discovery that, oh my gosh, this is really happening. The Bible is really coming alive.
Well, you have a wonderful way, you and Brock and Bodie, of sort of weaving in the Bible and prophecy and history and current events. For example,
Yes.
You talk about the Abraham Accords in a prophetic sense. Tell us about
Yes.
how you wove all that together.
I think that people, even Christians, many times they look, they see the big picture of what's going on, but they don't know, what does that really mean? And what Brock and Bodie have been able to do is to put that in a story, but bring it in a context where characters get to talk about what does this mean? And basically, the Abraham Accords, as you well know, are are historic to the degree there has never, all the way going back to Abraham, there has never been a peace agreement that goes all the way back to Abraham between his two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, that the coming together. You know what happened, obviously, with having two moms. You've got Ishmael has Hagar, and then Isaac with his mom, Sarah. So they're kind of divided and they go in different directions. Interestingly, they only come together at the end of the book of Genesis when Abraham dies. But the last scene that is given is that Abraham is their father, is the one that brought these two brothers together. Well, Chris, what's happening today is that the descendants of Ishmael, which are much of the Arab and Muslim world, are now saying we would like to be reconciled. And they're calling it, I mean, this is a political deal. They're the ones that are calling it the Abraham Accords. So that's like, Israel's like, we could make peace with 90% of our former enemies, mostly within the Sunni Muslim world, the Arab Muslim world, and partly driven by the other side, the Shiite side, the Iranian side that's wanting to take over Saudi Arabia, and they have a whole different eschatology, but they're not related to the Jewish people. Iranians do not have any blood ties, and they're wanting to threaten Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is like, hey, we need Israel, we need our brothers and sisters, and so I just think it's fascinating that God is using modern geopolitics to literally drive and compel the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael back together under the same tent with the name before the whole world of Abraham. So what I want to tell Christians, and that's what this whole book series is about, is that this has never happened in 4,000 years. I mean, we are living in unprecedented times for many reasons, but that's one of them. And of course, the Bible talks about there will be a driving peace deal that is finally put together in the end times. And, that opens the whole scenario of the book of Revelation. So there's a lot of exciting, fun things to talk about, but I think people need to connect the dots and begin to pray because, not to go immediately to, it's going to be the end of the world and all these bad things are going to happen, but this is a healing time. This is a meaningful time. We're to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I think God is going to use this season of peace to bring a lot of healing, a lot of, melting of hearts, and a lot of good can come from this season. So, but we need to be aware what time it is. So it's been fun to put that in a story and let people read it, discover it, and get excited about it.
Up next, Israeli archaeologists uncover a 3,000-year-old inscription from the time of the Bible. After 7 years at one site, Israeli archaeologists have uncovered an amazing discovery with a connection to the time of the biblical judges. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl shows us why a 3,000-year-old inscription is getting so much attention.
This is Khirbet El Rai in southern Israel, where archaeologists say they found a piece of pottery with a rare inscription.
This is the 7th year for this excavation site. This year, archaeologists are talking about finds from the biblical book of Judges.
The most exciting discovery is an inscription which is from around 1100 BC, the time of the Judges. We know very little about this period from archaeological point of view, and we don't have any meaningful inscription from this period.
Then, they discovered part of a jar handle in a storage pit in the ground. The name Yerubbaal, Jerubbaal in English, was written on it in ink.
And this is the first time that we have an inscription from the time of the Judges with a meaning. And in this case, even the same name appears in both on the inscription and in the biblical tradition.
Excavation director Professor Josef Garfinkel says they've found about 100,000 pot shards at the site.
But why this is so important? Because it was inked, and we have here 5 letters. We have Yud and Resh and Bet and Ayin and Lamed. And when you read it, you get the name Yerubbaal.
Gideon's father Joash calls his son Jerubbaal in the book of Judges because he tore down the altar of Baal and then defeated the Midianites. Archaeologists say the owner likely wrote his name on the small jar. They don't have proof that the inscription refers to Gideon of the Bible, but Garfinkel says it's significant because it highlights the historical connection to the Bible.
So it's indications that there were historical memories embedded in the biblical text and passed from generation to generation.
Several years ago, Garfinkel told CBN News he believes pottery dating back to King David and other findings point to Khirbet el Rai as the Philistine town of Ziklag, where David escaped King Saul. This year, about 25 local university students had to replace 100 volunteers kept away due to COVID-19 restrictions. Most are studying archaeology and are happy to be here.
It's fun when you go into to the field and then you see, oh, I do know, you know what I mean? You pick up something and you're like, I know what this is. I studied it in class and I know what it is.
And they see the biblical connection.
Dr. Yossi Garfinkel is doing a great job in actually proving the Bible is actually a historical story and not just mythology.
This was meant to be the last season for excavating at the site, but Garfinkel says if they find more artifacts, they may keep digging. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Khirbet el Rai, Israel.
Well, that's one more archaeology story here in Israel that confirms the Bible. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blast so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline. On Jerusalem Dateline.